Recently, I made this meme for Instagram about how I feel after trying to speak Lithuanian at a cafe or restaurant.
I'm super excited. It was really tough. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was definitely a different ballgame, but I had a blast, so thank you.
A bloody, beat-up face with an upbeat, positive attitude. Yep, that's a pretty good reflection of what's going on in my mind after walking away from the cash register. This is especially the case now that I have some awareness of declensions and case endings, because I now have this unfortunate knowledge that I'm probably going to use the wrong ending and say things grammatically incorrect. But that's how I feel about an interaction in the Lithuanian language. For this video, though, I wanted to discuss the various reactions us foreigners get from Lithuanians when we try to speak the language. I don't think any of this will be earth-shattering. We all know it's a case-by-case thing, and everyone reacts to things differently, even depending on the context and situation. But I thought it would be fun to share some stories and compare this with English. So let's get started. First off, something I've heard at least 4 times now is that the metaphorical bar was quite low back in the day, as it relates to foreigners speaking Lithuanian. That is to say, from the people I've talked to, a few words and phrases like 10 to 15 years ago might have resulted in a great celebration and maybe even a free drink. From the people I talked to who were in Lithuania a long time ago, this was apparently what happened. To get some other perspectives, here's a friend of the channel, Sean, who lives in the United States. Sean has been regularly visiting Lithuania for years now, ever since he met his wife in the early 2000s. From his home in Virginia, here's what he had to say.
In Kaišiadorys, went to the eyeglass place. I had an American prescription, which they accepted. But I had to say to the girl in Lithuanian, I said something to the effect of, I'm very sorry that my Lithuanian is not very good. I'm going to do the best I can to get these glasses, but I wanted to know how long it would take. The cost involved, and I needed the best lenses, so on and so forth. And we're only there for maybe 10 or 11 days, so I know that it's a crunch timing. I felt that we got the best service of probably anybody ever, but it seemed like she made the phone calls while I was there to see where she could send to get the lenses done in the fastest amount of time to make sure that I got my glasses before we left, offered to ship them to me in the US, and they were great. And every year that we go to Lithuania, this has kind of become a thing. They remember us. The Americans here, and they always take care of us. Best customer service I've ever had, but I do feel that had something to do with the fact that I was a foreigner attempting to speak, and I think that had I not attempted to speak Lithuanian and explain myself in the very beginning, that maybe we just would have been another number, and maybe my glasses wouldn't have been done by the time we left to go back to the US.
And funny enough, my friend here in Vilnius, Mark, is also from the state of Virginia. He's quickly become a famous actor on a new YouTube channel, which I'll link to in the description. But here's Mark's reflection on this topic.
I wasn't expected to know much Lithuanian when I got here, of course. But I did say a few words at my wedding, which happened in the first year or two of my being here. And that seemed to get a great response. But as you agree, and I think you'll agree, the small efforts that we make on a daily basis are usually well received. Sometimes we have trouble explaining ourselves and there's confusion, but many Lithuanians seem to be really happy with our efforts.
And finally, I interviewed another guy named Mark. He's not from Virginia, but this one is well-known travel YouTuber Mark Walter of Walter's World. You might have seen that video already, but we talked a few months back, and something he said from that interview fits perfectly here.
It's funny because I go out to the bars or restaurants and I go order, and then people just you could hear the record streets like hold up, and I can't tell you how many times just by I'm just ordering, if you were wait, tu kalba lietuviškai? Yeah, aš kalbu lietuviškai. And they're like, oh my god, but you're not from here, and they were so happy, and they would flick the chin, and all of a sudden the shots were going, So
I definitely feel like a little bit of Lithuanian went a pretty long way back in the day. It sounds like even just ordering in the language and saying a few words brought a great deal of joy. For all the Lithuanians watching, do let me know if you would agree with this, and if you have any stories to add as well. My own experience, having been here for the past 3 years, has not exactly been like this. I've had a wide range of reactions. From the interactions I can remember, I've had one person at a cafe encourage me and offer to continue in Lithuanian so that I could practice. But I remember another time, after ordering a drink in Lithuanian, the bartender just responded in English and was giving off the vibe of, I don't have time for this. At least that was my own sense of things. But I think there are a few obvious factors that explain the differences. First of all, it's 2023. We are now close to 2 decades since Lithuania joined the European Union and over 30 years since the country regained its independence from the Soviet Union. Little Lithuania has really opened up to the world and has become much more international. Younger people are more likely to speak English, and some are even eager to speak it as their form of practice, or even just to be helpful and accommodating to customers. Additionally, not all service industry workers are even Lithuanian, especially when it comes to Vilnius. Vilnius has become a refuge for Belarusians fleeing political instability and Ukrainians fleeing war. It wouldn't be surprising to me if they were working at city center establishments with basic Lithuanian, but a little more English. That's just a guess though. I do feel like smaller, perhaps more remote Lithuanian towns in other parts of the country might have different reactions than compared to people in the diverse capital city that is Vilnius. On a recent lunch meetup with Mark, he insisted on ordering fully in Lithuanian. There was a moment at the beginning where the woman responded in English, perhaps just to let us know that it was an option, or perhaps because she wanted to speed up the process. But Mark toughed it out, and I remember at one point our server walked away with a giggle and a smile. No, Mark wasn't at all flirting. He was simply putting a lot of effort into speaking Lithuanian, and it was clear that this woman really appreciated that. As you can see, it's just a big mix of reactions. And it all really just depends on the person and the circumstances. You, my YouTube audience, have been overall very, very supportive of my efforts in speaking Lithuanian. As far as I can count, there have been 2 discouraging comments that have stood out to me. While I won't share either one with you in detail, they both had the general theme or tone of, wow, you've been living here for X amount of time and still can't speak the language? Needless to say, this kind of reaction is quite discouraging. Obviously, I know I'm not where I should be, and I'm not where I want to be with my language proficiency, but I know I'm moving in the right direction. Just pretty slowly. It's important to remember that everyone's journey is different. A person's age, background, daily circumstances all have a role to play in how much progress is made with learning the new language. This is also something Mark pointed out during my chat with him.
I think we, as people who are learning Lithuanian, fall into a few categories. Sometimes there are those folks that just have been here a long time and just haven't made the effort and won't make the effort. But there are also people, perhaps like you, who are freelancing and don't have a lot of opportunities to speak Lithuanian on a regular basis. And then others who are actually really immersed in the language through work and through other channels, family channels and things like that. For instance, whenever I meet up with my mother-in-law and it's just she and I have to speak Lithuanian because she doesn't speak English. So there are a lot of different dynamics to how we learn and why we learn, I think.
So yeah, it's definitely a diverse spectrum. From the polyglots who grew up with 2 or 3 languages already and can pick up Lithuanian in like 6 months, all the way to the North Americans who somehow settled in Lithuania years ago and can barely speak the language, and then those who don't even care to try. Ultimately, I think it's all about the effort. I know that I lack discipline, and I know that there are enough other things pulling my attention away. But every time I'm out and see a poster, I'm sure to look up words that I don't know. And I think the next thing on the list is going through this book that my wife got me. There are a few other things that I do, but I won't go into detail with them. Of course, as the years go by, the expectation also goes up. And up, and up. 3 years in the country and not being fluent, some locals can accept this. 10 years living in the country and not being able to speak the language, you either need to have a really, really good reason, or people will definitely be looking down on you. I'm reminded of something that Chris Broad of Abroad in Japan told on his YouTube channel, but I'll just share the clip here.
How long have you lived in Japan? And they ask that because they want to know, how good is your Japanese? Like, how good should they expect your Japanese to be? Naturally, if you say, I've been here a year or 2 or 3, there's an expectation that your Japanese is appalling. When you've lived here 10 years, naturally the bar is a little bit higher, rightly so, which presents a problem for me because in many ways, my Japanese isn't that good. In fact, it's probably worse now than it was 5 or 6 years ago. I stopped. I quit my job as a teacher, I left a working environment where I used Japanese all day, every day, and I threw my eggs in the YouTuber basket, where unfortunately Japanese isn't really needed in everyday life. And thus, my Japanese never progressed. There is a disappointing gulf between where my Japanese is and where it should be, and where it could be. And with each and every passing year, when people ask how long I've lived in Japan, that bragging and that pride that I once had has crumbled away into embarrassment, to the point that 6 or 7 years in, I'm ashamed to admit, I started to conveniently forget how long that I'd lived in Japan.
So, with all that said, I have to thank you all again for your continued encouragement. Many of you recognize how hard the Lithuanian language is, and you continue to appreciate the effort. Ačiū labai. Thank you very much. And so, to wrap it all up, the Lithuanian word of the day is pastangos, which means effort. Pastangos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.